It's all of the above. I was invited to give a lecture. I'll let you guys know ahead when it gets closer, if you like, on October 25th, God willing.
I called them and they said they didn't have you down on Beverly.
So they have
on
okay.
Pico, but there's another Carl Jung facility, Culver City or something. Which place do you?
It's going to be at Pico, and it'll come up. So
you said it's not on their calendar.
Okay, it'll come up. Don't worry. Thank you for following.
It's a long time.
Sorry?
It's in October, right?
Right.
So
October 25th.
Yeah. Okay, let's focus, friends. So I want to answer Ralph's question, please. The question, as soon as I heard your question, I mentioned the lecture because Carl Jung is one of the founders of psychoanalysis. He was the only guy in Freud's circle who wasn't Jewish. Freud lived in Vienna 100 years ago. And Vienna 100 years ago was what New York City is today. A very Jewish city with lots of Jewish culture. There are 1.5 million people living in greater New York area today, Jewish people. So Freud lived in the same street as Herzl, the founder of Zionism, and another great playwright called Arthur Schnitzler, who was also Jewish. And Elie Wiesel had a great joke. The late Elie Wiesel, God rest his soul, said, "Thank God Freud and Herzl never met, never ran into each other, because you know what would have happened? Dr. Freud would have said, 'Good morning, Dr. Herzl. Why do you look so gloomy?' He says, I have this dream of a Jewish state, and it's not giving me any peace." And it's like, "Why don't you come to my practice? I'll help you out." And then Freud would have healed Herzl of this crazy dream, and there would be no Israel. So Carl Jung was the only non-Jewish one in Freud's circle. And when he broke from Freud in his circle, Freud was very happy. He said, now non-Jews who
wouldn't go to him,
because Vienna was a very anti-Semitic place. Mm-hmm. They had a viciously anti-Semitic mayor called Karl Lueger, and Hitler himself, Ymach Shmo, started his career in Vienna. There was
what year was this? About what year?
What are you talking about?
This all happened that Jung left Freud.
100 years ago.
No. We're talking about the last 2 decades of the 1800s. Yeah. Of the 19th century. So anyway, so Jung Carl Jung, to finally answer your question, believed in collective archetypes. We have a subconscious of traumatic things that happened to us when we were kids, for example, or bad things. We have a subconscious of things we did that we don't want to think about. We have a lot of subconscious, things that people did to us, things that we did ourselves. But what Jung is saying, that's fascinating, he says, not only as individuals we have those things that we bury in the cellar, which is not always the best thing to bury in the cellar, to a certain extent, but as a nation, we also have collective subconscious. Right? And one example is there's a lot of psychological literature about intergenerational transmission of trauma in families of Holocaust survivors, how it affected the kids, how it affects the grandkids. But the first thing I thought about when you ask your question is a letter that Yoni Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu's older brother who died in battle for Israel, he wrote to his girlfriend when he was 29, a year before he died. He wrote her a letter right on the eve of the Seder night, and he was staying in the base with his soldiers, and he told her this. He says, when I think of my past, I think not only of my personal past, but also our collective national past as a people, and my being an inseparable part in the chain of our collective existence. So that's a great, by the way, that's a great man, or a great person. I once heard a rabbi called Rabbi Friend from Baltimore says, the greater the person, the more their circle of concern is beyond themselves. And he says, what's an Adam Gadol? What's a really great man? He says, in Hebrew, it's so beautiful, he says, Ha'ani shelo hu klal Yisrael. His self is the self of the entire Jewish people. Somebody like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There was a man called Dr. Yosef Burg, who was a politician in Israel for many years. He was a Holocaust refugee. He was a philosophy scholar. He spoke half a dozen languages. Was a pious Jew. And his son, who later on became also a prominent politician, said that on his deathbed, what his father told him is, who is going to take care of the Jewish people? That was his concern, the leadership for the Jewish people. So, I think this idea of Tisha B'Av, I don't know if I answered your question well, you'll tell me now, is that we have our past as individuals. We have our past if we are in a spousal history. We have our nuclear past, we have our nuclear family, extended family, specific Sephardic or Persian or Hasidic or Ashkenazi circle, the Jewish people, all of humanity. We have our pasts and our consciousness in these ever-expanding circles.
I agree and I disagree, and I have to tell you just one comment. You don't see any Americans walking around guilty of slavery, till the 60s, and you don't see any Americans walking around with the injustice that they did to the Indians here. And
Oh, sure you do.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
You go to colleges and they talk about it.
Not
They
only
talk
that,
about it.
no.
Are you saying that Jews are very...
Unique in that?
Let me say something and tell me if that's what you mean. It's one sentence. Hitler once said that conscience is a Jewish invention. And he was right. And that's why he wanted to destroy us. Because he wanted to build a new civilization of people who have no conscience. So are you implying that Jews tend to feel worse about themselves and their misdeeds?
No, let me tell you why you're wrong about the American people.
I don't know if I'm wrong. Maybe you differ with my opinion.
No, I'll tell you why. And that is because, the lot of the way that Americans vote and all the things that they put in is based on the guilt of slavery they're still carrying around, the American Indians, what they're carrying around.
That's how Obama got
all the
elected.
things that they vote, all the money and taxes and everything is, for the poor people and the reverse discrimination that goes on in this country in favor of the black people because of the slavery. We're still carrying that around.
Okay, sorry, it's a whole new subject. So get up.
It's okay. But Sarah she was waiting so patiently. You had a point to make earlier. Oh.
Stretching out.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark.
Okay,
Please.
I have a question.
Havad.
When you said we are finite, and so I wanted to clarify that in terms I've been thinking of. So can we also say that we are a temporary incarnation of an infinitesimal fragment of God? In other words, to say, is there a part of God in us?
Yes, and it's very pervasive in the Kabbalistic psychology, in Hasidic thought. They say that the soul is chelek eloka mima'al mamash, that the soul in its innermost core, is verbatim, so to speak, a parcel of godliness from on high. All right, so
it is God within us, in a sense. We're not separate because God is one, meaning God is the totality of existence of matter or whatever. So the totality of matter is within the infinity of God. Would be the Jewish.
But let's try and I'm going to tell you something.
Look, he's writing notes on what you said.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
You guys give me. We all learn together. I learned it from my rabbi in New York, whom when I met him I didn't even know how to pray like the afternoon service mincha, and he grew up in a very secular reform environment. He wasn't even bar mitzvahed. And once after services in the synagogue in Manhattan, he was going to learn with someone. And of course, he's a rabbi and he's a PhD, whatever. The other guy is a wonderful guy, he's very smart, but doesn't necessarily read Hebrew. So I'm asking my rabbi, are you teaching Mark now? Another Mark. And my rabbi tells me, we are learning together. So we are all learning together. So obviously, as part of our dialogue and learning together, I'm going to tell you this. Somebody introduced me to an author a few days ago who is a psychologist, Jewish, and Buddhist. It's what some people call Jew-boos. Yeah?
Never heard that term.
His name is Mark Epstein.
No?
Mark Epstein. He's a Harvard-trained psychologist and a Buddhist. And I started reading, I'm actually putting on audio. That's like I'm in the car or whatever, I'm trying, like, basically, if I come home and I'm really tired and I don't feel like whatever, my wife is doing something else, so I can just listen to it like people used to listen to the radio, instead of just sedate myself with some stupid show. Something to think about, right? There's a website called Audible. You familiar with it?
Mm-hmm.
Audible. It's part of Amazon. You download the app, you can listen to books. It's like listening to a radio show. It's better than cultural garbage. You deserve better than McDonald's for your mind. So that's my opinion, at least. So it doesn't mean you can't watch nonsense every now and then. By the way, my wife and I went to see Wonder Woman last night. We were so tired because our daughter woke up at 4:45. Wonder Woman, that we saw like an hour and a quarter, and we were just too tired. We went home. But maybe I'll watch the rest of it another
It's
time.
supposed to be good.
The story's cute, it's a little kitsch, but whatever. I hope to finish it. I gave a sermon about Wonder Woman and Jewish themes in it, but we won't get to it now. We'll go back to Mark Epstein, remember? The Jew-boo,
The Jew-boo.
who was a Harvard-trained psychologist, and he's also a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist. And I started listening to his memoir called Going on Being, which apparently is a concept in psychology, which means basically when you are connected to yourself and there's nothing external to you that's taking you away from your inner center. Cool, right? That's what we all want.
Going on being.
Yeah. The name of that guy I'm telling you is Mark Epstein. So he said in Buddhism there is this notion, and I didn't understand what he was talking until we all started talking, and as a result of it, I had an idea. He says one of the things that he was saying is that, some spiritual teachings say that that I am nothing, that you are nothing, that the ego, the self, is just nothing. And our Western secular culture says you're definitely something. Right? Look at all the Hollywood, so the cult of celebrities. So definitely an individual is something. Right? We're all something. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs gave a TED Talk a couple of months ago. And he said that if anthropologists from outer space would come and see our Western secular culture today and see that we have things called iPhone, iTunes, iPad, and that we have a social ritual called the selfie, they will say that we worship the self, that we are a society that worships the self. So are we something? Or are we like some spiritual teachings in the East would say nothing? And he says Buddhism says you're neither something nor nothing. And then I started thinking about it. There's something very Jewish in that too. Because what Rabbi Soloveitchik, for example, is saying is like, to be a traditional Jew means to be a conqueror who takes time to surrender before God. What does it mean? It means 6 days of the week you go out there and you're a go-getter in your career or whatever it is you do, but on Shabbat you surrender before God. Or Yom Kippur you surrender before God. or Pesach with the chametz, you surrender before God. So you are something in the world, you go out there and you build your careers and you are a successful businessman or whatever it is you do, but there are times where you are nothing. You nullify yourself before God because it's Yom Kippur. You understand what I mean? So you are something in between something and nothing. So there was a great Hasidic sage called Rabbi Simcha of Bonim who said something quite well known. He says each one of us should walk around life with two metaphorical notes in each pocket. You're familiar, Sarah? One of them says, Anochi afar va'efer. I am but ashes and dust. Or as the Mishnah says, I came from a drop of seed of one's father, and we're going to a place of dust where worms consume the flesh. That's the grave. So Anochi afar va'efer. That's the whole story. A few years between the drop of seed and the sand. I am nothing. The other note says, Ba'avuri nivra olam. This world was created for my sake. Doesn't get more narcissistic than that, does it? So, it means that everything that's in the world, one way to maybe understand it, is here to empower me, you, to lead a great life. That everything that's happened has brought the world to this point where you exist from your family, and now you have this, and with this you can pray, with this you can give tzedakah, with this you can call somebody who is sick, with this you can listen to great books. So, like, the world is here to empower us. And everything that we have in the world, we should kind of surf it, we should ride it, so that we can live in godliness and in greatness. Let's go back to Tisha Be Av. So we kind of digressed a bunch. But we're starting, let's talk about this Shabbat. This Shabbat we're starting the book, it's the last Shabbat before Tisha Be Av of the three, of the difficult haftarot, prophetic portions. Then we're going to have 7 Shabbats in which we're going to have happy-go-lucky, jubilant haftarot, all from Isaiah, about cheer up. And then we have Rosh Hashanah. So we have one sad haftarah this Shabbat, 7 happy ones, 8 Shabbats, and then Rosh Hashanah.
Wow.
So I believe September 21st, God willing. So this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of Chazon, of vision. The vision thing. George Bush Sr. said when he was elected that he doesn't have the vision thing, which is not a good thing, because everybody needs to have vision in life.
Vision. So Chazon means vision?
Yeah. Chet, Zayin, Vav, Nun. And we're starting the book of Devarim, the final book of the Torah, called in English, Deuteronomy. Devarim in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, means things, but in rabbinic Torah Hebrew, it means words. These are the words that Moses spoke to the people of Israel.
How do you say words in Hebrew now?
Milim. So, Devarim means words, because it's all a series of speeches that Moses gave in the last few weeks of his life before he died. And he's telling the people, get ready, we're going to go into Israel. Keep your focus, because if you don't, you're going to suffer, and you're going to be vanquished by your enemies, and you're going to go into exile. He's talking to all the future Jewish generations, as individuals and as a nation. And the interesting thing about this book of Deuteronomy of Devarim is that we don't have so much the formula of Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe le'emor. God spoke to Moses, tell the people so and so. Moses is speaking in first person to us. God is not speaking to Moses, he's speaking through Moses. And by the way, remember that Moses started his career by saying, I'm a terrible speaker. I'm of uncircumcised lips, arel sfatayim. Get somebody who's a good speaker for the job. Like all great people, he doesn't want the job. The best people don't want to be president of the United States, or they don't want to be on the board of a synagogue. And the great prophets didn't want the job. Get somebody else, because I'm a poor speaker. And at the end, he becomes the master orator. The entire book of the Torah is his words, which teaches us that if we do something l'shem shamayim, purely to serve God, the sky is not the limit. There is no limit. If you do something l'shem shamayim, truly to bring blessings to others and to the world and to serve God, we can do things that we dare not imagine. Now, what about the English title of the book? Devarim means words, Moses' words. Deuteronomy, we've said before, from the Greek, deutero, yanitnin, 2. Second Torah, like Mishneh Torah, because Moses repeats much of the Torah narrative, like what happened with the spies and what happened with the golden calf and how we received the Torah, and we're going to get another text of the Ten Commandments. So a lot of the Torah narrative and the mitzvot are reiterated in this book. Some people believe that one of the most important things in life, and they're right, is what they call in the Hasidic world chazara. Chazara, to review. To review and to repeat. And that's what's happening here. Moses is repeating...
Is that related to Hazarai?
No. By which she means chazirim. So here's something interesting. On Friday night, on Monday night, on Tisha B'Av night, which book of the Bible are we going to read, friends? Anybody recalls? There's a book, a Megillah, that we read. There are, I believe, 5 scrolls. Which of the Megillot come to mind? Which ones? What Megillot? What scrolls in the Torah? Megillat Esther, we read on Purim.
Oh,
right?
Getting the Megillah is... wasn't it Purim?
Gorilla.
Yeah, Purim is Megillat Esther. On Sukkot we read a Megillah Israel called Kohelet. In the Hasidic world and the Ashkenazi world, they read the Song of Songs on the Shabbat of Pesach. Sephardim read it on Friday night. On Shavuot, we read the scroll of Ruth, Megillat Ruth. On Tisha B'Av, we read the Megillah, the scroll of Eicha, Lamentation in English, authored either by Jeremiah, Eicha,
Eicha,
Aleph Yud